Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to be looking into today was one that I literally came across today, and I really wanted to cover it. I found it super interesting. There was a sort of press release on BBC News literally, I don't know, a few hours ago, and I'd never heard of it before, and it kind of just surprised me a lot. So yeah, I would like to look into the case of Brenda Venables, who has been missing since the 80s, and nobody knew what had happened to her until very recently. Well, initially in 2019, but very recently her killer has been caught, kind of thing. Well, convicted. So Brenda Bolton, as she was initially born, was just 23 years old when she actually met a man who would become her future husband, David Venables. They were at this farmers event thing. It was called Drywitch Winter Gardens, and that is where they met. They hit it off straight away. They really, I don't know, they had a lot in common. They came from sort of the same rural communities. They just clicked. I don't know how else to explain it. They just clicked. So they did begin a relationship together. David used to live at home with his family, who owned a pig farm, quite a big pig farm by the sounds of it, and he would work on that. But obviously now he wanted to go and see Brenda because he really liked her, so he split his time between the two. He would, spend a lot of time with her in a home in the town of Rushock, and then he would also go back and then sort of spend the other time working on the farm for his family. Brenda was described as being just a genuinely lovely woman. She was very kind, very caring. Everyone said everyone liked her. She was always really good company. I don't believe they ever had any children together, but she had brothers, sisters, they had nieces, nephews, do you know what I mean? She had quite a lot of extended family around her, but I'm not sure as to whether her and David actually had any children. I couldn't find that information, so that makes me believe that they didn't, but I could be incorrect on that. But they got on that well together that in June of 1960, they decided that they were going to get hitched. And so they did. They got married, they went and had their honeymoon in Jersey, and then they began looking at like a house where they could live together in, and they moved to Quackenhouse Farm in Kempsey. Now this confuses me a little bit, because from what I've found out, they lived somewhere else and then they moved into this farmhouse. Basically, his parents gave them like a large plot of land for them to build their marital home together, and that is what they did. They built their marital home there, and then like a year later they moved in. But I don't know whether that's actually Quackenhouse Farm or not. I don't know. It could be. We'll have to see. Maybe that'll come back to me in a little bit. But for now, they had this house built and then they lived in it. It was surrounded by beautiful countryside. They had the best views ever. It was just such a happy, amazing, seemingly life. People from the community looking inside thought they had it perfect. I mean, obviously not everyone's perfect, and I don't mean perfect when I say perfect, but as close to perfect as you can get, I guess. What they didn't know though was that David began having affairs with other women. It was hard, of course it would be, but I don't know, in them days I guess she felt like she had to stay with him, like she couldn't leave. It's just really heartbreaking. So that was going on in the background. Not that anybody knew about it. Well, not many people knew about it. And they just carried on their lives together, pig farming. And then, suddenly, Brenda vanishes. It was the 2nd of May in 1982. And then David reported her as missing the very next day. So basically, the police came round and asked what had gone on, etc. He said that him and Barbara the day before were planting seeds, potato seeds, I believe. Everything was normal. She seemed fine. She didn't seem out of character whatsoever. Just a happy, normal self. And then at night time when they went to bed, again, he didn't notice anything untoward. He said that she was a little bit down because she had been suffering the ill effects of a cold, but that was basically it. They went to bed without any issues. And then when he woke up in the morning, she was gone. Had just vanished. And he didn't have a clue where she was. So he rang the police. Of course, the investigation opened up, and it was a missing persons investigation. So they go outside, and again, it's a massive countryside surrounding them, so they've got a lot of areas to search. They had helicopters, they had dogs, sniffer dogs, they had all the village came out to look. They said, like, obviously, if one of your own goes missing, then you're all going out looking for her. So they did. All the village was out looking for her, for Brenda. They really needed to find her. They didn't have a clue what had happened to her, where she'd gone. Just seemed like she'd sort of got up one morning and walked off. It was completely out of character for her as well. She'd never done anything like that before. And obviously, David and her family surrounding her were all really worried as to what had happened to her. They would search everywhere, farm buildings, derelict buildings, anywhere that they could think that a person could have been hiding in or anything like that. They sort of dug away at the shrubbery and dug through that to see whether there was anything in there like that they could have missed. Like, say you go through some really tall grass, they sort of chopped that down to make sure that they didn't miss anything. They looked in ditches. Honestly, you name it, they looked there. Well, almost. And you'll know what I mean by that in a little bit. The search covered like a 4 to 5 mile stretch of area around Kempsey and up to like the motorway. And that included 9 acres of their land as well. It lasted 3 weeks of search. They were just looking everywhere they could, but sadly they didn't find anything. And it kind of seemed a bit weird that David wasn't really looking, like helping too much with the search. Like, you know, your wife's gone missing, you're going to want to find her. So, and he didn't seem to be all too concerned with it, which, well, that sends up red flags straight away for us, but I guess at the time it didn't. They were just looking for a missing person. Despite their efforts, they sadly did not find Brenda. And her case literally went cold for decades. And when I say decades, I mean like almost 40 years. Her family was just left with no answers. They had no idea what happened to her. Just clueless. They just know that she's just a missing person and that's it. They were left with lots of questions, no answers to those questions, and that was until 2019. So basically, David had sold his house in 2014, the farmhouse, and he sold it for £500,000, so, you know, a lot. And then he moved out, and this new people, whoever they were who bought the house, moved in 2014, and then by 2019, they decided that they were gonna empty the septic tank. Now these things need doing. I don't know how long, often, but they need doing. You know, so they decided that they needed doing. They were going to do it. So off they go. They get people in, whichever company does that kind of thing. And the engineer starts rooting around and doing, I don't know how you empty a septic tank. I think they suck it out, but I don't actually know. So whatever, they're sucking it out or whatever they do. And then he comes across a big bunch of hair. It looked like human hair. And then he sort of does it a little bit more, and then he finds a human skull. So yeah, he basically found lots of things. He found a pelvis bone, thigh bones, he found different pieces of clothing, underwear, the remains of like shoes and a sweater, all were in this tank. So basically a human body, fully clothed, had been placed in this tank. Now, at this actual time, obviously the police came out, and at this actual time, they were looking into a property in the area of Penshaw, which mustn't be far from where this farmhouse was, because they were looking at information on Susie Lamplugh. Now, she went missing in London in '86, and I've done a video on her, and basically, they were thinking that this body was hers, because it was very close. It had been dumped in this drainage septic tank, and they were thinking that it was her. The case with Brenda going missing was just a missing person, like I said, so it didn't cross their minds. They thought it was Susie Lamplugh. They looked into all that, into the connections with Susie Lamplugh, and it turned out that it wasn't actually Susie Lamplugh. It came out that the remains, I think it was a year later, but the remains in the tank were not that of Susie Lamplugh, like I've already said, but they were that of Brenda Venables. Wow, shock horror. I mean, it really surprised me, this case, because like, they searched everywhere. The police really did search everywhere, but when they were looking into how the septic tank had been missed, somebody, I don't know whether he was a police officer or not, I can't remember, but basically he said that he just seen a concrete slab on the ground and didn't think much of it, and that was that. That was why it was not looked into, because they just saw a concrete block there and didn't really think much of it. Which is really frustrating, because if they would have looked in there, obviously hindsight's 2020, I'm not trying to blame anything, but just really frustrating that they would have found her, because she's been there all along. And of course, with finding out that not missing after all, she had been in that septic tank for all that time, you know, they kind of had an inkling as to who had done this to her. And so they arrested David. He was charged for her murder. He was 88 years old at this point. And he went to trial. This is when everything started coming out. Like, it was found out that she knew about all the affairs, that he was kind of leading this double life. He had one woman on and off all the time who was called Lorraine Stiles. And basically he began dating her in 76. And when his wife went missing, he was still dating her. She actually sort of made a statement to the police years later in 1984. And she told them that the day after he reported his wife as missing, he rings her up and tells her that his wife is missing, that he wanted to let her know before she found out any other way, basically. And that was right after he had phoned the police. She said that on the phone he was normal, he was composed, he was together, just like a normal conversation. You wouldn't think anything was wrong, basically. But then he just came out with, like, my wife's missing. She then said that he came round 2 weeks later and he didn't mention it once. She said she couldn't understand how he was so calm during the entire thing. And, well, we all know why, don't we? She actually sadly passed away in 2017, but that statement was made to the police, obviously all them years later, and it was actually read out during his trial. Just more evidence, just more nails in the coffin for David, which is obviously a good thing. It just seems like another one of those sad cases where you're like married, you've got somebody, then you cheat, and then you decide that you're getting rid of one of them and you go with the wife, and then she's got to go. Rather than divorce her or leave her, get with a new person, no, she has to be killed. Yeah, okay. He would continue to say that he didn't do it, it wasn't him. He literally even blamed it on Fred West. Like, seriously? Yeah. The judge, well, whoever it was, I don't know who it was, but basically the trial was saying that, probably the prosecution, right? Yeah, maybe the prosecution. That it's very, very unlikely that Brenda went out of the house that morning, jumped into the septic tank, put the very heavy lid back on top, and then just drowned there. Like, essentially took her own life. Nah, that didn't happen. They were very convinced of that. And also the fact that she had left the house in the morning and then suddenly come into contact with a stranger that meant her malice, that murdered her and dumped her in the tank that not really anybody knew about. I think there was 2 people who knew about it. David knew about it and maybe one person that had serviced it before. That was it. So yeah, they found it very unlikely. And basically that even if anybody else was responsible for the murder, that they wouldn't have known about the tank. And it's true, like I said, only 2 people knew about it. Despite his claims of innocence, the jurors rejected all of that, and they decided that this man was guilty of his wife's murder. Obviously, the sentencing has not happened yet. This literally has happened the other day. Well, today probably, which is, what, the 17th we're on now? So sentencing will continue. But obviously, no matter what he gets, he's probably going to be life, innit? Well, let's face it, he's 88. So even if he got 10 years, 98. He's going to die in prison. I reckon he's going to get life anyway, because he murdered his wife and put her in a sewage tank. It's disgusting. And there's a lot of people that want to concentrate like this case and the attitude in sort of 1982 when this all happened, about how it was different when women went missing in them days, because it was clearly. Like nowadays, you're looking straight to the husband, you're looking straight to those people closest to you to see whether they did it. Yeah, okay, they might be missing. They look for them, I can't find them. What if they were killed? They jump on them straight away now. But Brenda never was classed as anything other than a missing person, despite David acting weird when everyone's looking for her, despite his on and off girlfriend telling the police basically that he was acting weird and that obviously he was having an affair with her. She must have told him that. So they knew that. They knew that he was acting weird with regards to his wife going missing. And still, they didn't class it as a murder investigation once. Thought didn't even cross the minds. And that lasted 37 years until the murder investigation was opened, when her body was found. And even when her body was found, they thought it was Susie Lamplugh. They didn't think it was Brenda. And her family are obviously... they're really happy to know what happened to her, obviously, because they've just been left wondering, like, wondering what happened to her, wondering where she went. They had no idea. So they're happy about that, but they're devastated as to what he did to her. Like, not only did he kill her, he then, I don't know, just disgraced her even more. Not disgraced her, that's not the right terminology. Like, disrespected her body even more by putting her in the septic tank, which he then carried on using. And that thought, the family have said, like, really haunts them, which is so sad, and I completely understand. Obviously, it is, why would he put her in, well, he did it to hide her. It was a really good hiding spot because he got away with it for 40 years. But obviously, it's just so disrespectful to her and her memory and her body, and it's awful. I just feel really bad for her as well, because she knew about these affairs and how sad she must have felt during a marriage, knowing that he was going out doing all this and she was stuck at home just feeling like she couldn't leave, which is just heartbreaking. And he was slowly started taking her away from her friends, her family, things like that. Basically coercive control again. I mean, I keep saying this, coercive control, because it keeps popping up in a lot of these cases recently. But that's what it is, you know, he's controlling her, and I don't know, it just always ends in tragedy. It's awful. The family said that in her last year she would just sort of focus on her housework and things like that. David in the trial basically said that they still had a sexual relationship and they still slept in the same bed, but then when it came out about his psychiatrist, I believe, that he had told them that they didn't have a sexual relationship for years and that they didn't even sleep in the same bed anymore. So obviously there was a massive rift between them, but then why don't you just leave her? She could continue her life, be happy. She was like 40 odd, 46, something like that, in her 40s, I believe, when he murdered her. And so just leave her to live the rest of her life and be happy with someone else. Nothing ever gives you the right to take away anyone else's life anyway. But there's just no need for it. Just leave. It's so frustrating. Like I said, Brenda's family finally found out what happened to her. They finally got to lay her to rest after all of those years. And now they can carry on knowing that she is laid to rest and that her killer will serve justice for what he did. Brenda finally got justice for her murder. Obviously, it's a hard case all round. But yeah, we're still waiting on to see what his sentencing will be. But like I said, it's going to be life either way in it, let's face it. He got away with it for 40 years. He got to live his life for 40 years, and that's annoying. That's really annoying. But at least he was caught in the end. That is the end of the case though. If you guys have enjoyed this video, give me a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel for similar content. Anyway, that's all I have today on the case of Brenda Venables. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time.